We're live. What's up, Enoch? How's it going?
What's up, Dorian? How's it going?
Good, man. Good. I'm pretty excited to do this. It's gonna be like the first podcast type episode, doing an interview with my good friend Enoch, who's a UX designer and developer. Do you want to tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about yourself, Enoch?
sure. I claim myself as a UX designer, but I really went to school, got my degree in web development. Went to Full Sail University. It's an online school. I did 2 years and a half, and I learned everything from front end to back end to some design. Not really much design, but yeah, mostly the web development. That's where I learned from. Well, they introduced me to a lot of that, but I honestly don't recommend school because a lot of the stuff you need to learn, you learn it on your own. So
Yeah,
it's kind of like a hate and love type of relationship with the whole school decision.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I personally like the school thing for me. It was not in the game plan. Like I felt like I was a little too old to go back to school. I had like a full-time job. I had responsibilities. I had a mortgage, and just the fact of like having to go to school to learn was going to be a little bit harder for me because I was like 32 years old when I was learning when I started teaching myself how to code. How old were you when you decided to pursue web development? Because your background's in art and you've done quite a bunch of different things. But like, what age did you say, all right, I'm gonna go with web development? This is what I want to do. When did that happen for
20
you?
Officially 24 years old,
24.
but I was already doing CSS and stuff back in like 2005, 2006 when MySpace was popular. I was doing a lot of the templates and customization for my friends and some family members. So it's kind of like I started back then. I didn't know it was CSS. I just knew that I could change the font color and this and that, put some hex colors, and wow, like it's doing this and I can have control over my theme. Like I was doing that back then, but then I really took it seriously in 2000. Was it 2011?
Nice.
Yeah, I was 24 years old.
Nice.
Turning 25.
And
Yeah,
and I guess now the question is, how old are you now? How long have you been doing it professionally?
I'm 32, about to turn 33 by the end of this month, November 30th.
Nice.
So that's about what, 7 years?
Okay.
Close to that. Yeah. Well, if I do the math right, my head's not working.
So I met you at my first job as a web developer, and I remember I was just
Right.
so lost, and you were super helpful. And then once I actually kind of, I kind of started figuring out what I was doing and felt a little more comfortable. I learned so much just from a UX perspective, from a UI perspective, from HTML and CSS. Like you taught me a bunch of that stuff. How did it feel for you when you first started and you got your first, official web developer job? And how did that, like, how was it going in, like, getting dumped in the cold
It
water
was
and having to figure this stuff out and, working on a team and whatnot? Did you freelance at all beforehand, or did you get a job right away? I don't really remember that.
Yeah. So I started. So when I was during school, I was doing freelance. I was doing some websites for a friend of mine. He started a clothing company. So I did a WordPress site. And in WordPress, I learned a lot on, like theming things. And basically most of it was CSS as I was learning it. But then I took on more like freelance, and did my first website for a client. It was all just HTML, CSS, no JavaScript, maybe a little bit of JavaScript, maybe jQuery. It was very, very minimalistic. Maybe it was like the menu or for mobile, just a little in and out animation. That was it. I was using jQuery. But like the feeling I got was like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. The more I learned, the more I realized how much I don't know and how much more I have to learn. And at the time, my confusion was basically the like the words of the technologies, like I think it was Gulp. What was the other one? Like the NPM packages and all that stuff. Like I didn't understand that. In the front end world, like Bower was big back then, and
I
like
remember.
I don't get these things. What is it for? And like this stuff they didn't teach me in school. So then I like try to wrap my head around that and these weird names that they put to things, these CSS libraries. I'm like Bulma and like I was like, why are these people coming up with alien names? It just didn't make sense to me. But it was at the same time overwhelming to know that there's so much. And I think the one thing that I struggle with the most is organizing. Okay, this is what front end is. These are the, what's an API? What's what are the Chrome developer tools? Front end CSS frameworks. What is SAS and preprocessors? What's backend? What are the backend languages? What are the databases or ORMs and things that are within frameworks to connect to databases, and then getting into like hosting and how do I publish something to the web, and then I needed to install PHP or whatever, Ruby, like make all those things work. Like that was overwhelming to me because I'm like, whoa, there's so much to it. This world is so much. So I had to like break it down. Like I had to like do my research and try to map it all out. I found some videos, some guy explaining, he had a whole map of like, this is this area, this is this area, and then
I think I know I know the video.
Yeah. Oh, now I get it. Okay. That's what it is. I'm thinking I need to learn Angular and React all at the same time and they connect to each other. Oh no, it's either or.
That's super confusing when you really don't know and you're first getting started and you're just like doing HTML and CSS and starting to understand a little bit of JavaScript, and then you start, like you said, you start learning about NPM, you start learning about dependencies, you start learning about different front-end libraries and different frameworks for CSS, and there's so much to learn when you're first getting started that it's so easy to get overwhelmed. And I think everybody experiences that, and I know that a lot of the viewers that I have are kind of where we were when we first started learning, and when maybe some of them are junior developers. I don't know if there's many senior level devs watching my stuff. I know that my audience is probably more junior level and people who are learning how to code, and that's just such a common feeling that I try to explain and tell people in a lot of my videos that it's perfectly normal to feel like you're overwhelmed, and with that you're gonna get the imposter syndrome. You're gonna start feeling like it's just too much to learn, that everybody else that does this stuff is like way smarter than you are, and you just don't understand it because you're dumb. And the truth is, a lot of it just comes with experience and time. I think it's really funny when you were saying how the names and all the terminology, when I started my job where I was working with you, and we had some pretty senior level guys there, including yourself, and you guys would use all this different lingo and all these different buzzwords, and I would jot them down. Like I wouldn't really tell anyone. I would like write them down, and if I didn't know what something was, I would Google it like when I got home, just so I can know what you were talking about, because I felt like I was so out of place that I was drastically trying to understand what everyone was saying. And really it comes with time.
And it's funny because once you start working with other people, you ask these questions, you hear their story, how they started, and then when you can relate to the things that they struggle with, they're like, so I'm not the only one that went through that, and you're still going through it. We're always learning, So it kind of like makes you feel, okay, I'm not that dumb, you know. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like, okay, so it's a learning process. You learn, and then the fact that you're encouraged to Google things because you don't know, and like I came to that realization that the real skill is to be able to teach yourself on the spot just by Googling something. Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. And I bet you like most of the like senior level developers till this day, they're still Googling things because they forgot. It could be something as simple like a CSS selector or a pseudo selector or something, and you can't memorize
You
everything,
can't.
but the fact that you know that it's there and there's always a solution, that's what it is.
Yeah.
You're just trying to solve a small logical problem
Yeah,
or anything.
yeah. It's funny
That's the real skill.
that you say the Googling thing. It's also another thing that I guess a lot of people who are first starting out don't realize. Many times when I'm working on code, like in a big code base, a lot of the times problems that you've run into or things that you're trying to do have already been done in your code base. So you actually learn a lot just from being in a big code base and understanding how it works and being able to be like, oh, that's right. We have a helper function that will take care of this problem, or we have a CSS class that will take care of that will take care of this styling issue or different things like that.
They already went through that.
And
they went through
yep.
it, they solved it, and here's a little piece of code that's going to help you do that so we don't have to repeat, and it's that whole
exactly.
idea of, like, don't repeat yourself, already solved that.
Yeah, yeah. and a big part of the job is understanding where to find those things when you're in a new code base, because many people who are just getting started, they're just learning if else statements, they're just learning like really like the idea of what coding is, but then they don't realize that they think that they have to build everything from scratch. And when you're first learning, it's good to do that, but once you've kind of been doing it for a little while, you realize that there's no real need to reinvent the wheel, and there's a lot of solutions out there that can help you solve problems, but the key thing is understanding what those solutions are doing rather than just blindly copying and pasting stuff. And I think that comes with time and experience when you know more or less what you should be looking for. And like you said, when you have an idea and you're like, oh, I know how to fix this, I've done it before, but I don't remember what the property was that I needed to add, or what exactly the syntax was for this particular thing. Like, regex, for example. I don't know any regex. I know a little bit of how to use regex, but if you told me to write a line of regex from scratch, I don't use it that often. I don't need to use it that often. And when I do use it, there's a lot of tools out there that help you with understanding those things better and make the process of working with something easier. So it's really interesting to hear from someone else too, of like that confusion and that feeling of being lost.
Yeah, I had that a lot. But then I think it all comes to repetition.
Yep.
I think the experience, like a lot of people say the word experience, and you learn as, you gain experience. But really what that means to me is like repetition. Repeat.
Yep.
And the more times you find that problem, then your mind starts picking it up. At the first time, you're not going to remember. But once you see it like 5 different times, 10 different times, oh, okay. Then you start, internalizing and memorizing those things. Not everything you're going to memorize, but you're going to get a concept. Okay, this is a pattern happening here. I also see this pattern happening here. And then, you start seeing the matrix, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. You're like Neo and everything's just binary. No, really, that doesn't happen. You still stare at screens and wonder what the hell is going on most of the time. At least for me, that's how it is. So I had a couple things that I jotted down because I wanted to ask you from like a UI, UX developer and designer position. I actually have seen a few people ask me this. I made a video on Google doing new certs that are going to be focusing on different areas of software, and one of them is actually for UX designer. And a lot of people, including myself when I first started, the idea of coding and programming is very hard. And I remember that I kept falling back to like HTML and CSS because every time I would come across JavaScript, it would make me feel dumb, I would feel discouraged, and I would just go back to my comfort zone, which was HTML and CSS. I didn't particularly I can't say that I hated it. I really liked it at the time. I thought it was super cool to see stuff move around on the screen. I liked being able to build a web page. But eventually I felt that personally, I didn't really take the path that I wanted to. I took the path that was easier. And I say air quotes easier because it's really not easy. And you hear a lot of like back end guys be like, oh, HTML is not a programming language. But the truth is that it's still very hard to learn, and it's really hard to make a web page look good. So oftentimes I kind of suggest that, it could be an easier route to go with like UI development. But from a designer standpoint, people are asking, would UX designer or UI designer be easier than being like a UX UI developer, like learning HTML, CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript? Do you think, like, how do you weigh those two? Like, which one's harder? Are they the same? What are some things that may appeal to one person in one area versus like what may appeal to someone in the other area?
Okay. So my experience, I find front end development a little bit easier, but at the same time, there's so much more challenges. There's more moments where you're like, I give up, you know. But then you come back, you solve the thing, and then you're just happy as hell. Like you're excited. You're like, yes, I did it. There's a lot of that love hate relationship with front end and code. I think there's more resources out there for front end for code, and now UI UX is starting to gain more popularity. That the resources are becoming more available to people now. I feel like development has, there's a longer trajectory of problem solving.
Yeah.
I feel like UI UX is more new.
Yeah.
And there's this thing that happens. You might be, you might like design. It's very objective. Everybody has a different opinion on what looks good, what doesn't. There's different tastes. And UX is really about designing and making decisions based on facts or data, or you can't just go with your instinct. Oh, I think this looked good because I like this. The more I'm in this field, it's more about what's better for the user and whatnot.
Yep.
And trying to align that with the business objectives, with what whether you're at a corporate job and what they're trying to achieve, and then getting criticized from upper management, stakeholders.
Yeah.
Man, you have to have tough skin. You have to be able to present in front of people that they're gonna give you feedback, and it might not be the feedback that you're looking for.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Whereas, and for a programmer, they could just say, well, we got a mock, we got a design, that's what was asked for, and they could just wash their hands and say, designer, that's what they're provided.
Yeah.
And then we'll take we have to defend, our decisions to do things. We're the creators, right? And that part, that's hard because you're almost like you're going into a meeting or something, and it's just criticism.
Yeah.
But you have to think, you have to detach yourself, and it almost takes that emotional intelligence to be able to detach yourself from your designs. And I try to design without putting my emotions in it. I try to design for the user and what's better for the business.
Yeah.
But then when I design for myself, like what I like, it might not be the best thing for the public.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, trying to find like what you like that will appeal to business when you're making design decisions for your company that you work for, versus when you're working on your own personal projects. You can do whatever you want, and
right.
And it's funny because you said the criticism thing, and I've been there. I've been in the room with you guys. I know what it's like when you pour your heart and soul into a design, and then it just gets picked apart by everyone in the room. And
yes.
And not every time it's technical people that are picking your stuff apart, and not every time it's people who really understand the process and the thought that goes behind UX. And for anyone who doesn't know the difference between UX and UI, it's user experience and then user interface. And user experience is basically, if I'm a user and I drop into an application and I have never touched this application before, I need to figure out how to use it. And user experience focuses on making that a seamless easy experience for the user.
Right.
And,
Takes it from point A to point B,
yeah.
And can you get to point B easily?
Yes.
Without having any frustration on your part, can I do this as simple as possible?
But
that's basically user experience.
One thing I've noticed though is when business gets in the room, many times they put the design too much into the UX and they don't see past what it looks like versus what it acts like. And I know that that's a constant struggle that I've seen over the years. I see it now at my current job. My title is UX UI developer, but now I work on a cool team and they've been letting me learn more back-end stuff and more full stack type of stuff, but I still am like one of the top people that they come to for UI UX problems and trying to solutionize that. And it's very difficult sometimes when you try to explain to a room of people why you're doing something a certain way, and even though it may not look how they want it to, it's going to be an overall better experience, because people tend to get tunnel vision, and a lot of the times they can't see past how something is built. So then you have to combine both the ability to make it look good and the ability to make it work well. And that's where it's really like, that's where it separates the pros from the amateurs. And that's where I think watching your work, over the years, I know that you're really good at what you do. So
man, it's you touched on a point where not just dealing with stakeholders or product managers, but also like when I work with developers, when I work with you guys, I also had to design things, putting myself in the shoes of a developer, and I think that's the one good thing that I have experience using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. And understanding how web development works and components, and the whole idea of don't repeat yourself, component first approach of development. I try to like design to make sure that I'm not repeating designs. If I can eliminate patterns or reuse components, I'll design that way. And that is the toughest thing to sell, because at that point you're thinking like a developer while designing, and it's a balance, man. It really is a balance. You try to balance what the business wants. You try to balance what they like as far as design, their taste, colors and buttons, and then also try to cater to the user, what they're trying to accomplish, to make it easier for them. And also balance, easier developer-friendly designs. You know what I'm saying? Like, I try to consider all those points in UI UX.
Yeah. It's a lot that goes into it, and many times, feedback that you get from people who don't understand, they really just think that you're trying to make a page look pretty. And you mentioning that knowing development and having some technical chops when it comes to that, how it really does help when a designer understands those things when you're a developer. Because many times if you have a designer who's only maybe worked with Photoshop and doesn't really know web development, and maybe they come from a graphic design background, it can be hard to have to implement what some designers may create when it comes to actually having it functional and making it work and look good. If they don't really know how HTML, CSS, and front end works.
So talking about like UI UX and front end developer, have you been handed down a design from a designer that might not know HTML, CSS, and then you had to kind of jump in and try to like tweak things, or struggled with a certain design that you were handed down to? What's your experience on that?
I think that's probably a challenge that every front-end developer faces at some point in time. Even if the designer has good technical ability when it comes to HTML and CSS, it's still, there's always going to be some things that you get in a design that may be challenging and may be difficult. But I notice more so when people don't have the UX, UI, HTML, CSS experience, that tends to happen. And I guess some of the things is just trying to implement something that just too many moving parts, or right off the bat you can see it and just be like, this is not really ideal to try to implement, and the amount of effort that's going to go into making this work and making this look good is probably not worth it. But then it goes back to kind of what we were saying earlier, that when business gets sold on a design and gets too focused on having something look good rather than user experience, that's where there's that line that a UX developer and a UX designer is supposed to walk. And I know I've seen you in the past fight it sometimes with business and explaining why we made decisions like that. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges when there's a designer who's not very familiar with how front end works, is just, they tend to do things that just aren't ideal for user experience, and maybe a lot of the times it's challenging to implement because they try to do a little too much just to make something look good rather than to make it work right.
Yeah. And I've seen it happen a lot with responsive design, going from desktop, tablet mode, and then on mobile, something completely different ordering of elements. And then you're like, wait, I'm going to have to restructure the HTML to fit this, or use some kind of Flexbox magic. It's like, I had to, like, myself had to, like, try and, convey to another designer, like, look, man, this is, if you were to code this, you wouldn't design it this way. And then I would suggest things, and
what
it's hard.
I've seen in that was even more work to convince business that the mobile design should have less features and be more bare bones than a desktop design. And I've personally experienced this, and I know you have too, where you basically, business wants everything available at all times, and then when you
want to show everything,
and when you explain to them, well, I've got 400 pixels of width here that I can work with, and maybe 600 pixels of height, and you want to get everything we have available in that menu on this screen, or all the features that we have on desktop or tablet size on a cell phone media query or a cell phone breakpoint. And then you have to tell them, well, we have to start figuring out what's critical for our users and what's critical for business, because at some point you can't have every desktop feature on a mobile device.
What are the most important parts and the least important parts, and start building on a hierarchy of these things.
Yeah.
And then you almost get to the point where, like, you as a developer or a designer, your job is to kind of eliminate and simplify, and then that fight, man.
Yeah, I've seen you fight it. I've seen other designers fight it. We've fought in it together. We've fought in it. I don't know if that's a word, but
so I'm gonna tell you a secret. And I think this is gonna be valuable to your listeners, to your audience. That, like, if you can make an argument, but you could back it up with something that is painful to the business, like, hey, really,
I know where you're going.
It comes down to dollars. It comes down to dollars.
Yep.
And you're like, look, we're like, I'm gonna put an example out there. Like, we had a registration form, right? And on that registration form, you would have to, put your name, all your basic information, and you'd have to put, what state you're from. But specifically, we had a message that said, hey, Missouri residents, blah, 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 blah. You can't sign up for XYZ reasons.
Here's legal things we need to have on the screen.
And you have an entire paragraph in the middle of the form, right? And then it's like, we need to, legals, like, we need to put that there because we don't want to get in trouble. It's legal.
Yep.
And then it's like, it's always there. But then you're like, well, that's only going to serve up to, like, maybe 2% or 1% of all our users. There's 1 million users, right? And only 1% are from Missouri.
Yeah.
Like, you're catering
to the edge
all
case.
This extra design, edge case, to millions of users. It's only going to apply to, like, 1%, right? You might as well remove it. And if if you select, you know, Missouri as a state, then show it up.
Yep,
You know, like
yep. Because then you know, for lack of better words, you
right,
cover. I'm not gonna cuss, but you cover what you need to cover to not have to get in
right,
trouble and to satisfy businesses' needs. But then you
right,
still give the majority of users the best experience that you can, rather than having a big blob of text in the middle of someone's screen that probably doesn't
right.
pertain to them. So yeah,
And this is where I would go in and be like, okay, if we're showing this to 100% of our users, there's going to be all these users that are going to get intimidated by the paragraph or whatever, you know, like, oh my God, this is like too much. You know,
yeah,
they're going to get, you know, they're getting a slap in the face with all this information up front. Trust me, you're going to lose users. You're going to lose
yep,
members
yep.
to sign up. And then I'd be like, you know, for that 1% of people, we're going to lose. If we lose 5% of users not signing up because they found the form too heavy, and you know they're just lazy, they don't want to fill out so much form.
Yeah.
You know, what is that 5%? And if I could translate that 5% to like equals to $200,000, you know, and I calculate based on, you know, if I go to somebody that has the reports of how much a user is worth, you know, and then I do the math and then I give a number. That's where I pitch, and I'd be like, okay, it's painful for us to show and lose 5% of users because we're going to lose, you know, $500,000. Dude, that's how they went. That's how you get,
Yeah.
you know, those higher ups, you know, buying in. Oh, you know what? That makes sense.
Yep.
We don't want to lose money.
Yep.
You know,
You gotta hit them where it hurts.
yeah, and it's like you got to find those pain points and sell it and put it out there. And dude, like that's been my strategy, man.
Yeah,
That's been my thing fighting.
It's a good strategy. I remember I still use this quote sometimes where you're like, you gotta push 110 so you can get to 90, right? Like you gotta kind of you kind of gotta ask
That's
for
another.
the extra and try to get as much as you can and go beyond what you need in order to try to get what you actually want done. And I remember that you always used to say that.
Yes. I intentionally would do that. I would design something and then over design another area that I knew that wasn't going to pass, that I was going to get, you know, like they're not going to go with it. And then I'm going to have to revert and remove it. But I would do that on purpose so they could focus on that flaw so I can get the thing that I really want. So it's almost like I'll go 150% on the design so I can land back at 100, which is my target where I wanted to start off from the beginning. Because if I were to like, present it with what I want, they're gonna remove from that, or you know, like something like that. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
It made total sense to me, and like I said, I still think about that to this day. I feel like we kind of went a little bit more of dealing with grief and more of the difficulties of day-to-day stuff that an experienced UI UX developer would have, and a front-end developer would kind of, you know, how we kind of work together and some of the challenges that we have there. But since my audience is kind of, you know, newer people, I had a couple of questions, and I'm trying to see which one might be the best one. And so one of them was, you come from an art background. And dude, I'm a big fan of your art, and anyone that's watching this, you know, Enok's channel originally started with a lot of his art on there, and you can see how talented he is. But many people, myself included, when I first started learning, you know, HTML and CSS, the design felt very creative to me. And in a sense, it really is. But it was also a little discouraging for me because I felt that I had no creative ability when it came to making things look good, when it came to art, when it came to photography, or, you know, anything that involved that kind of level of creativity. Do you feel that someone who is trying to learn UX and UI design and development, do you feel that they need to have an art background, or do you think that it's something that can be learned and something that can be trained just like any other skill, and you don't need to be an artist or someone who's, you know, very artsy in that sense?
Right. There's definitely the skill, the talent, the thing that you're born with, right? That's hard. That's hard to reach. You know, that's something that, you know, some people are just natural at. They just have a good taste.
Yeah.
and I struggle with this, you know, even in, I see developers that, wow, they just think logically. I think that I think logically, you know, but it's like there's a natural talent behind that. But then there's also a structure of how to learn things, you know, and then like for any beginner, if you want to learn designs, you know, like I would go with a front end framework like Bootstrap or Zerb's Foundation CSS framework, you know, and then use the components that they already have and run with that. Don't try to make it all pretty. And if you want to make something pretty, copy from multiple sources, bring in the things that you like from different sources and put it into your own interface.
Yep.
It's hard to come up with something yourself. You know, you almost, you know, there's this quote that I don't know where it's from, but it's from some book. Artists, good, like great artists steal. Have you ever heard of that?
Yep. I've heard that. Somebody in Discord actually, Tinus, I think it was. I don't know what happened to him. He kind of dropped off, but
yeah.
he said the same exact thing when I was asking him for some tips on like Discord and how to set that up, and he told me that he's like, good artists, or what is it? Good artists copy and great artists steal or something. I think.
Yeah. You know, copy or steal, and it's like I'm not gonna lie, like that helps a lot. You know, like when you have a concept, just take it.
Yeah.
You know, don't copy it word for word. Steal it, but also steal from different sources and then form it into your own creation.
Well, it goes back to what we said earlier, like don't reinvent the wheel, right? There's so much good stuff out there, and if you don't feel like you can come up with designs on your own, a good starting point if you're trying to be a designer could be, like you said, go to some of these different CSS frameworks that already have pre-built components, and rather than trying to build every component from scratch, use some of theirs and start building layouts and start building websites and start building copy other really nice websites that use maybe even those frameworks and try to replicate it, but in your own way, and add your own style to it. And I think that's really a good way to start when you want to consider UX and UI as a path.
Yeah, there's plenty of resources out there for illustrations, iconography, you know, those type of things, color patterns, typography. You know, there's preset libraries and style guides, you know, almost like design systems that are already built, and all you have to do is maybe change some colors, you know, and add in your illustrations, and everything's like almost done for you.
Now
the hard part is laying out what goes first, what goes second. You know, that's where
it gets tricky.
That's where it gets. That's the user experience design part of it. You know, that's the hard part. You know, doing the UI. I don't know. To me, I find that like the easy part. You know, the UI, making it look good. Just because there's so much resources out there.
Yeah.
I could download a sketch library and it's already got that. The hard part is like, should I put a hero with a video on it?
Yeah.
Or should my hero parallax? And, you know, like, what's the structure? What should I go put first? That's the hardest part. And that comes down to, you know, what are you trying to sell?
Yeah.
You almost have to put yourself in a marketing mindset, you know, to try to solve for that.
For sure. Now, I know that you recently made a video talking about some of the things that you can set up to like start learning design. And I'll make sure also to link that above for anyone interested in Enok's video on that. But I wanted to ask, because many times, you know, and I often tell people this is like, if you can learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and build some projects, that is enough to start applying for a job. I'm not saying you're going to get a job right away if you learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript alone. But it's a start. So for someone who wants to go with UX, UI design, is there like a holy trifecta like that? Is there like, if you learn these 4 things, these 5 things, these 6 things, you can start applying for work? I know you still have to build projects, because you're not going to apply for a job if you don't have any design portfolio. But what are some things that people could learn that could get them started on the path to looking for a job in design and UX and UI?
Definitely your portfolio. That's the one thing. But your portfolio is built up of a lot of projects,
Yeah.
right? Or 4 projects or 3 projects. Sometimes less is more. Um, it's it's difficult because it's kind of like a catch-22 where you want to have projects that also show results of whether they work or not, but then that's your experience. You can't put something out there if you don't have the users, or if it's just a demo project, a dummy project that you build based on a tutorial or something. It's hard to sell that, but at the same time, I think if you get into UI UX, you focus on making a useful app or some kind of web application, that has a lot of interactivity, whether it's a money transfer app or something like you're ordering food online and you design an interface for that, just those type of projects, or even software tracking app, ticketing system, those type of things. Something that you could sell that that can apply to the real world, but you do a damn good job on documenting your process, not the final result, but the process, how you thought from beginning, and you sketched it out and what your end goal is. That right there is going to sell you more than your final result. Wow, it looks like a pretty screen, you put it on Dribble.
Yeah.
Everybody puts a heart to it, but that's not going to get you the job. What's going to get you the job is your thought process. If you could document that and put it in your portfolio, I went from step 1, step 2, step 3. I did this. I did the wireframes. Then I chose, to use Bootstrap as my framework. I built it in HTML. Here's my GitHub repo. You put those things together in some kind of timeline, or just stack them, in detail. You could make a blog post about it, in your portfolio.
Now
that right there is going to sell you more than the actual design.
But let's say to start a portfolio, what are some of the things someone would need? Like, I know that if you use a Mac, you can use Sketch. I know that there's Adobe XD. Is just learning how to use one of those tools and starting to mock stuff up enough to build your portfolio? Is there a couple other things that you should look into? You mentioned frameworks for CSS and learning a little bit of HTML, but if somebody just wanted to focus on design, what are some tools that you would recommend them to use to start building the portfolio and to start mocking up designs in wireframes?
Figma, I think it's free. Yeah, Figma is free.
Nice.
You could start with that. Sketch, you pay for it, so I wouldn't recommend that. That's what I use.
And it's Mac only, right?
It's because
I always forget that.
It's Mac only, yeah. So Figma, it's a web-based web application, and you can also collaborate with other people. But the fact is that it's free. You can get started with that.
Is Figma like Envision, or is that a different type of tool?
It's like Adobe XD and Sketch.
So it's more mocking
design
than Envision is actually like laying out like the what I guess what's the difference between Envision and say Sketch?
Okay. So Sketch is you design it, you do all the, you do your interface, you put your button, your images, your cards, whatever you design it, right? And then Envision is where you upload those screens to Envision, and that's like a web browser where you can make this button go to the next screen, and then you prototype. So you kind of use that as a presentation.
Gotcha.
That it's a presentation tool, It allows you to communicate the designs to other people, and demoing what it's supposed to look like, how it's supposed to work.
Gotcha.
That's Envision.
Gotcha.
And then people can comment in there, and then they can, give you feedback or whatnot, approve it, not approve it, and those types of things.
And I've worked with Envision, but I've always worked on it as a front end developer, not as a designer.
Right.
So
and
to me, I don't really. Since I don't really mock stuff up. Well, I do now a little bit. But not to the level that you do, because the app I work on is more of mostly forms really. But I just didn't know what the difference was, and I'm assuming that many of my viewers who are newer to programming and trying to learn something to get a career might not know. So that I'm glad that you kind of clarified what the difference was between something like Figma and something like Envision.
Yeah, Figma, Adobe XD, and Sketch. Those are design tools.
Cool.
I believe XD allows you to also prototype, and it gives you a URL where you can preview things.
Yeah.
So XD has Envision and Sketch all put together in one software.
I've heard a lot of good things about
like
XD, and
yeah.
I don't use those kind
It's
of tools.
good. Those tools are good. Like it's awesome.
So,
But I believe it's paid. I'm not a XD guy, but it's popular.
I thought it was
I've
free
used
for a
it.
while. It's probably one of those like free freemiums or whatever,
Maybe
that you have to pay
maybe.
to unlock all the features. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The viewers will have to check on that. But you said Figma is a good place for them to start if they did want to start doing designs. And you said the Figma is free. So there you have it, guys. If you wanna learn a little bit of design and maybe look into UX and UI design, go check out Enok's video where he talks about that, and go check out Figma for some free tooling that can get you your portfolio started.
There's a lot of YouTube videos out there on how to get started designing an app, and I think the best way to start is just replicate something that's out there. Like I used the example of a food ordering app. You choose something on a menu, you see it, then you add it to your cart, and you go through the purchase process.
Yeah, and then
that simple.
All those steps, and when you're designing it, you don't have to make that functionality, right? You just lay out those screens and the process of those steps.
Right, and it's just like practicing what that interface is going to look like, whether it's on mobile, if you want to do it on desktop, however you want, But just creating these things, it's gonna help you more once you have a goal of what you're trying to create than to try to create something without having, I don't have an idea, I just want to learn. But then if you don't have anything you want to build, then it's going to be hard for you.
Yep. No, very, very good points. I think maybe we should think about wrapping this up, but I had one question for you, because so many people here, I talk about being self-taught all the time. What's some advice that you would give someone who is self-taught and trying to become a designer and not so much a web developer or a programmer? If you wanted to go into design self-taught, what would be some tips, just quick little digestible ones that could be helpful to someone?
Spend an hour or two, set time aside and practice. Copy something that's already out there. Try to replicate. Take a website or an app and try to replicate pixel by pixel that one thing. Like I promise you, that one exercise is gonna get you. It's gonna get you a long way.
Nice.
And and then if you keep doing that, if you repeat it, that's how you gain experience. And if you gain experience, then you gain confidence. And if you gain confidence, then you're ready to go look for jobs and or freelance.
Totally.
But yeah, it's that repetition, and putting some time aside.
Now, as far as developers, we have GitHub, and I always suggest to people to create like a GitHub account, because it's really important that when you start actually building projects that you commit your code and you push stuff up to GitHub so you can track your own progress, so you can show people your code, so you can get the little green dots on the screen and feel that sense of accomplishment. Is there any tools or social platforms for designers? You mentioned Dribbble earlier. Is there anything that you would recommend for someone who is trying to start as a designer, that a certain tool that they can use similar to GitHub in a sense that would be good for them to upload their stuff to?
Man, yeah, Dribbble is one. Honestly, man, I've seen a lot of people upload to Instagram. I know that's surprising, but yeah, Instagram, man, that's like a lot of people use that as their portfolio and social platform.
Cool.
Like it's huge right now.
Nice.
Yeah. There's Behance.
That was the other one I was thinking.
Yeah, that's in the print world. I don't use that much.
So Dribbble is just more for like development design.
But I feel like Dribbble, there's a lot of designers in there that are like more like, ooh, look, it looks pretty, but they're not usable products. The UI UX is not there. It just looks good. They have good taste.
Gotcha. That's some good resources for people to check out. Definitely recommend, some
Instagram,
people
man,
checking that
that's
out.
the hottest thing right now.
I'm such an old man when it comes to social media. I don't have an Instagram. I created a Twitter for this channel, and I barely even post anything on there. I like Reddit. That's my social media addiction is Reddit. But Instagram. Make sure you create an Instagram account if you're trying to be a designer.
All right, so there you have it. We just talked about UI, UX, front end development. Dorian, thank you so much for having me on your channel. And
Hey,
I'm looking forward to, collaborating and making this again. I think it's cool.
absolutely, man. I was super excited to do this. I've been putting like this whole podcasting idea on the back burner because I just wasn't ready for it. I'm completely set up for it. I'm going to be doing a podcast on code stories probably here in the near future. I want to do one on your channel. I think this is awesome. I wouldn't mind doing more of these. If you've got any ideas, I really don't know what the direction of this particular one was. I hope that viewers who stuck around enjoyed it and found value in it. If they
Absolutely.
did, please, if sorry, I got mumbled up some words there. If you did find value in this, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, check out Enok's channel, show him some love. Go see some of his content there, and
Thanks.
stay tuned for the next episode of, I don't even know what we should call this. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to call this.
Dorian develops.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, Dorian Develops podcast. Why not? Well, maybe if you guys have ideas for the
Are
name,
you going to do a podcast?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe this feels like a podcast. I kind of
Right.
wanted to just talk with you because I know that people enjoy maybe hearing a little bit from a developer and a designer, and just kind of just kind of just chit chat and see if people enjoyed it, and see what the feedback is that we get from this. Again, if you did enjoy this, if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions for the next episodes, make sure to let us know in the comments. Make sure to hit me up. You can join the Discord if you have extra questions. Enok's a member there. The Discord's linked in the channel description. It'll also be linked in the description below. And really, we'll see where this goes. It's the first time I've done anything like this. YouTube's still new to me, so I'm just playing it by ear. But if it does become a podcast, maybe I'll let the audience name it, as long as it's not highly inappropriate. Maybe they got some good suggestions, so drop those in the comments too.
Sure. Hey, if you guys have like a portfolio or some UI UX designs that you need feedback on, put them on the Discord channel. I'll be more than glad to give you feedback and help you guys.
Yeah,
Cool.
And I know you've done that recently for a few people in the Discord, and I appreciate it. I try to give people feedback where I can. Design is not my strong suit. Enok's the guy that helped me design my portfolio when I was in the middle of revamping it and sprucing it up, and really it looks as good as it does because of a lot of his feedback and a lot of the stuff that I learned from Enok while I worked with him for 2 years. So make sure you check out his channel. Make sure you watch some of his content on there. And thanks for watching.
All right. Thank you, guys. Peace.
All right.